Hello, and welcome. We are doing part 2 of Psalm 78, the Babylon Factory Psalm. And I wasn't even, you guys, oh my gosh, I wasn't even going to go down this rabbit hole because it's a big one. It's a big one.
I hear you're reading a boring book.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
This is not the father of the son of David. This is another entity operating through the corrupt priesthood to ritually curse, not tell a history. There ain't no janky ass legions of angels in this history. They're using the ritual language from the Exodus to ritually curse a people group.
Small little remnant, and they're going to go up against the whole entire church. That's what this book says. Did you know that? Like, every Christian should know that there's a remnant of people that are going to know the word of God in the last days that are going to go up against that great big house that falls.
The more you fight back, the harder it will be.
Great is the fall of that house.
Shut up for once in your life. Shut your damn...
And over here at my house, oh, I'm looking at all of you. All of you Christians, the entire priesthood, all the Jews and the rabbis, and you scholars, shame on you.
I'll be right back.
Exactly which God are y'all looking at here in Psalm 78? Priesthood, looking at you, rabbis, scholars. Which God is this?
Well, we can just turn these people inside out, won't we? I mean, the ones that are left.
Hi, and welcome to our Bible study channel.
Energy. Energy. You cannot fuck with this. Energy. You cannot fuck with this energy. Love to do those in the flesh. All of those who are listening. Don't miss the message, judging me. You cannot fuck with this energy. Energy.
These are videos that go pretty in depth. First thing you should probably do is pause and read our 12 rules for reading biblical text. And if you don't like the 12 rules or you don't understand the 12 rules, well, I don't have time to explain them all. Go back to the book that I wrote and uploaded on this channel, which takes you through the entire arc and how we made these quote-unquote 12 rules as a framework of what we found after 7 years digging meticulously and carefully through the text. So if you're confused, go do that. If I refer back, well, that's probably because we actually post these things in order. So they're all done in series. And if you jump in at the middle of a series without any schema or background knowledge, and you get all pissed off, well, that's also not our problem. This is a group where we go line by line, scroll by scroll through the text. Warning, we are not language sensitive, so if you can't handle some cussing, it's not the place for you. We also do not endorse nor approve of pretty much any mainstream theology. So if you're looking for that, also definitely not the place for you. We do a video about the characters that we use in our Bible study series. And the reason we do this is sort of so that they can kind of get in your head. So we do have a video explaining why we chose the people we chose and how their sort of energy characteristics go along with the biblical characters to modernize it for people so they know what the heck we're reading. Clearly, the Roman Church was not doing their job and looking for the lost sheep of the reunited House of David. So that's what we're doing. Okay. We're taking that away from them because they screwed it up. The brilliant rabbis also down there in Babylon are also not looking for the lost sheep of the reunited kingdom of David. So you're not going to hear, let's follow Rome. And you're not going to hear, let's follow the rabbis on this channel. Because, you know, sorry, not sorry, but the Bible wasn't actually written for the corrupt Levitical priesthood post-Babylon and Persia to read it through their little janky books. And it also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of pagan 4th century church fathers. So we're not doing that either. You guys can both have a seat. Oddly enough, the Bible also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of some dumbass scholars with pieces of paper that say they're smarter than everyone, but have never seen a Davidic covenant in their life. Not written for them either. You know who it's written for? It's written for the reunited house of David, who are actually in covenant and are actually the sheep. That's who it's written for. That's why nobody else can understand what the heck's going on. What you are going to hear is what you're supposed to hear, which is, let's follow the king. And let's get started.
So, we are going to war.
Okay, I already did this once, but for some reason, it didn't work out for me. So we're going to go ahead and try this again and see what happens. So here we are, and I wasn't going to go down this rabbit hole on Psalm 78, but you know what? We're here. Why not just do it? Right. So we're adding, instead of a 3-part mini series on Psalm 78, it's going to be a 4-part. So here's part 2. And you guys, this psalm is the dumpster fire that just keeps on giving. So if you remember, Psalm 78, we went through and we read it. We looked at who Asaph is. We looked at that little word, the mystery, right? The mystery riddles that Paul used in the Old Testament. We saw how they rerouted the covenant. We just started to ask, which God, Judah? Pretend Judah, not the peasantry Judah that got left behind and lost, but that priesthood pretending to be Judah that came back from Babylon, those guys. Exactly which God are y'all looking at here in Psalm 78? Priesthood, looking at you, rabbis, scholars. Which God is this? We talked about what removing the bound is. And we said that it's going to go into dating, genealogy audit, and this Caleb Joshua mess. And then they have some proof because of these scenes that it's a Judah-centric situation now. So, all right. Our reminders. Yes, we have Genesis 48. I talk about that all the time. We're gonna have to recast Genesis 49 and take a little bit of a closer look at Revelation 5:5. We hammered out the Greek grammar in that with the article bookends, the masculine, feminine, and the 2 different articles. But we're going to go a little deeper into what the implications of that are when we recast Genesis 49 and figure out who Babylon is, who the lion is. And we did our Micah GPS a couple times. We may or may not touch that again. And we shelved Hebrews for now because Hebrews is a whole massive giant rabbit hole all on its own, all on its own. So we're going to put that aside and hit that sometime in the future. All right. But we're going to backtrack a little bit here and remind ourselves that Psalm 78 was a ritual erasure so that we could have a Judah-centric history and society. Okay, so it's all fake, guys. It's all made up. Ephraim was blamed for rebellion, failure, and covenant breach. Now, they seem to be talking about breaching the Sinai covenant, but I'm going to challenge it's the Horeb covenant that they're talking about. And they seem never to talk about the Abrahamic covenant, nor the Davidic covenant, which all go through the Ephraim bloodline. Okay. Judah never got a covenant, guys. Never got a covenant, never got a covenant. Until Psalm 78, when they ritually erased Ephraim, our remnant bloodline covenant carriers. Okay. That's what people aren't understanding. Okay. These covenants weren't for all 12 tribes. Okay. Sinai was, and it's conditional on obedience, right? Then you have the Abrahamic covenant, which gets smaller and smaller and smaller into a funnel. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Ephraim. And it's never passed to all the sons. It goes through the remnant bloodline of Ephraim, not the whole northern tribe. They're a bunch of dipshits too, don't get me wrong. But it goes to that Ephrathite remnant in Judah, not of Judah. Those are your Ephrathites. So it goes from the whole tribe, and then it gets even narrower to the Ephrathites. And that Abrahamic covenant's handed down till we hit David and we get the Davidic covenant. It's even smaller. Bam, straight to the Messiah. It's a bloodline, remnant, bloodline covenant. Okay, all those covenants through that same tiny little remnant bloodline of Rachel's sons, the Ephrathites. So, but because of Psalm 78, Judah was crowned as the chosen tribe. They made Zion their capital, but they renamed Zion Jerusalem, so still not really. David was inserted as the override king, but through a Judah-centric lens. This is when Chronicles comes into play, and they jankified all those genealogies. And we've already discussed this many times back in the book. Chronicles is a mess, but we're also going to take a little speculative look in upcoming sessions on this whole Joshua, Caleb mess and what the implications of that would be. So David is the override king, but they took the override covenant bloodline from him and they just made him a Judah-centric legend, if you will. We've got our destroying angels deployed, but these can't be by Jesus's father. This is by a corrupt entity enforcing ritual vengeance. And we kind of saw how this whole meat craving and meat demanding out in the desert was twisted into this rebellion narrative against Ephraim. But what it really did was mask the priesthood's appetite for idol worship and idol meat contamination. This was a priesthood deal out in the desert. This was an Ephraim. No. And this is a priesthood who also happen to be the ones who demand animal sacrifice so they can stuff themselves and eat all the food that's brought to them. So we've got gluttony, covetousness, all that good stuff coming through the priesthood and their temple sacrifice system. And the priesthood, the Levites, were the ones in the desert stirring up all the shit for 40 fucking years. That was those guys. And the quote unquote wrath came upon those guys because of their janky ritual stuff. And all of this rerouting is wrapped in poetic fog. So scholars can say, oh, it's just a history. God rejected Ephraim. It's all Jewish now. That's the story. But there's a reference to Shiloh in here, and it speaks of it in the past tense. So this isn't like some prophet running around prophesizing about what's going to happen. The whole psalm's written in the past tense, meaning it already has happened. This is a maskil, right? It's a little history lesson, if you will. Wink, wink. Instructing us on what happened with covenant erasure here. Like, this is our story and we're sticking to it, guys. So this is going through the past. This isn't a future prophecy. And it's a southern editorial lens after the fall of northern Israel. There's a heavy focus on Judah and Zion called a renaming of Zion to make that Jerusalem, and renaming David to make him Judah. And that's in the end of this psalm, which indicates, again, a post-exile redaction. It does match the style of our Deuteronomistic history, which is often shoved into little groups with these exile scribes, those lying pens of the scribes. And it was their job to shape national pride and national memory. And why don't you just take a look at those words? Shaping national memory. Well, that's a nice euphemism. That means re-education, like re-education camps. We're going to shape the national memory. Yippers. Yes, you got to watch these scholars, man. They love to do euphemisms, which means the priesthood stole it from you and tough shit. That's what they're saying. There's also a use of archaic language forms. So this linguistic blend really suggests this later compilation, which is exactly what we talked about in the last few videos, how this text was, quote unquote, evolving over time. These stories, these oral traditions, and these texts themselves, as they were writing things down, it was an evolutionary process, okay? Probably during exile or post-exile. When I say that, I don't mean Assyrian. I mean those Babylonians and Persians again. Looking at you, rabbis. Looking at you. We've got our exile in our themes of failure, remembrance, and restoration. We've got this liturgical use in the Jewish temple. Okay, there's a video I put on there that shows how post-exile worship re-educated around temple rituals, which exactly aligns with Psalm 78's recitation context. Wink, wink, smile. There's our history. It integrates right into the post-exile theology, post-exilic theology. And of course, David is just a hero now. He's a ritual shepherd, not a scroll-backed override bloodline covenant carrier. And because they're not talking about David as a covenant carrier, talking about him ritualized into Judah, that's a priestly take. Okay. But for right now, we're going to focus in pretty heavy on these destroying angels. Remember we found those guys? Let's find out what the heck is with these destroying angels. He let loose on them his burning anger, wrath, indignation, and distress, a company of destroying angels. So he is letting loose this legion, if you will, of destructive angels with this wrath and indignation. Just letting them loose. Here's the problem. They're supposedly recounting the Exodus story, right? And they've got all of this ritual language from Exodus coded into this psalm. All of this occult, the astral attacks, the astral channels, all that stuff is going on here. And they say, well, this is a retelling of what happened in Exodus. Here's the problem. Yeah, guys, sorry. Exodus doesn't show a legion of destroying angels. Wah, wah, wah. Liars. Exodus 12:23 says, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your house to strike you. So we've got two entities here. We've got the Lord and we've got the destroyer that the Lord is not letting in the house. So we've got two separate entities. But the Greek or the Hebrew word, they don't use angel. It uses the destroyer, not a specifically named divine being. Now, Psalm 78 takes this moment and says a band of destroying angels. But that's not the original Exodus account. So I said to myself, are there destroying angels involved with the other plagues of Egypt? No, there's not. Someone's lying. So this isn't Jesus's father sending a tactical squad to erase Egypt. This is a priesthood-backed retelling, remolding, re-editing of history of the stories that's getting ritualized and weaponized against Ephraim. This isn't an accurate history. Therefore, why are we taking all of this coded language from the Exodus, all this ritual, occult, coded language, attributing it to a band, a legion of angels, dark angels, and then cursing Ephraim with that ritual language carried out by legions of dark angels that do not exist in the Exodus story? Why is that? Why did we do all that? Certainly it's not to tell an accurate history of the Exodus, because there were no legions of angels, guys. So what we did was we ritually cursed Ephraim. That's what we did. Now, when you do a Greek audit for Psalm 78, okay, you go word for word for word. This is plural, okay? It is a group, a legion of angels, not just a single agent, the destroyer, found back in Exodus. They're talking about something very, very different here. We also have plural of angels, and they're described as evil, destructive, and malicious. And this adjective also is in the plural, matching the legions of angels. Okay, so they're sending evil, destructive, malicious angels. These aren't enforcers of God. They didn't show up in the Exodus story, so they're not telling an accurate history. They're simply using ancient Egyptian coded, ritual, multidimensional, astral, attacking language, assigning destructive angels to that ritual language, and cursing and punish and throwing them, sending them over to Ephraim. That's what this psalm is. And it pisses me right off, as you can tell. So now we've got something that we call the Exodus doublets. And you have to look at the doublets through this angel lens. And this is sort of the string that we're going to pull today. Now, throughout the Bible, they have lots of different quote unquote doublets, which means it's the same story told two separate ways. Okay. So we've got, a really popular or more famous or more obvious example is the one in Genesis. We've got Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, two different creation stories. And modern preachers love to go out there and explain all kinds of cockamamie ways to tell you that it's the same story. It's just a little bit different, and here's why, and they make excuses for it. No, it's two different stories. Okay, and we'll go really deep into that when we hit Genesis. We haven't dropped that series yet. But they're very, very different. Particularly, I pay attention to, I think it's that first line or two in Genesis 2 that's basically giving a genealogy of souls that were created at the creation event, which is very, very different than Genesis 1. But I digress. That's for put a pin in that. That's for another time. But that's one of the most famous doublets. But we've also got a bunch of Exodus doublets here. And we're going to look at these through the angel lens, or the janky-ass destroying angel lens. So let's start and let's see this doublet, or same story, two different versions. We're going to share this tab instead. Today we're reading the easy to read version because it's complicated, and we're just going over it very, very briefly. So we've got Moses and Aaron. We're still in Egypt. The Lord spoke to them. He said, this first month's a year for you. Goes down this very, very specific way to do this cooking of the lamb, if you will, which is very reflective in Leviticus when they're talking about the recipe for their barbecues. But what I find more interesting in this paragraph if there are not enough people in his house to eat a whole lamb, he should invite some of his neighbors to share the meal. This would be tableship covenant, guys. We've talked about the importance of tableship covenant. Okay? There must be enough lamb for everyone to eat. You're not getting away with just having some green bean salad. Okay? You have to eat the ritual meat. Why would they have to eat the ritual meat, guys? I'll give you a minute to think about that. Yep, tableship covenant. Same thing Paul teaches. I find that very interesting. And this gets very, very detailed in exactly how to cook and roast this lamb and what to do with its innards. All that kind of stuff. And you got to eat all the meat that night and be ready to travel. And then it says, tonight I will go through Egypt and kill every firstborn man and animal. In this way, I will judge all the gods of Egypt and show that I am the Lord. But the blood on your houses will be a special sign. When I see the blood, I will pass over, and I will cause bad things to happen to the people of Egypt, but none of these will hurt you. So there's only one speaker in this whole paragraph, okay, on verse 12 and 13. So we've got one Lord, one entity that's going through Egypt, killing the firstborn, killing the animals. In this way, they're going to judge. They're going to be the judge of the gods. They're going to show that that's the Lord. It's all the same guy. Okay? They're going to see the blood. They're going to pass over. They're going to cause bad things to happen to the people of Egypt, but they're going to spare the people. This is all one entity speaking here that's doing all of these things. Well, then we go back and we do a whole nother explanation on how to do this lamb feast thing. I know. I'm like, didn't we just hear about this a minute ago? Yes, we did. It's because we're doing a different story. Get the lambs for your families. Kill the lambs for the Passover. Take a bunch of hyssop and dip them in the bowls, fill with blood, paint the blood on the sides, stop your children. And you're on lockdown. Nobody leaves till morning. But here's something more interesting. Not only are we repeating the recipe in a different way, at the time, the quote-unquote Lord entity goes through Egypt to kill the firstborn. He we'll see blood on the sides of the top of each door frame. Well, right now we're assuming that he is the same Lord that's killing the babies, but hold on. Then he, the same he that sees the blood, will protect that house and not let the destroyer come into any of your houses and hurt you. So wait a minute. Wait a minute. Now we have two different entities. We have one entity that's doing the killing, and we have, which is the destroyer, because they're destroying everybody in Egypt. And so they're killing the Egyptians and they're killing the Israelites that don't have blood on the door frame. So the only way to get out of this is to do the door frame thing. So this killer is the same as the destroyer. But we have another entity that's protecting the house that's not letting the destroyer come in. So we've got a protector entity and we've got a quote unquote Lord who's killing everything. Two different stories, two different gods, two different entities. Uh-oh. Two different stories, two different celebrations, two different entities, two different gods. So for a first grade summary, when looking at the grammar in Exodus 12:13 and Exodus 12:23, in 13, the first person I is doing everything. They're seeing, they're passing over, they're striking, and they're protecting. They're doing everything with no help. In the second one, it's the Lord in the third person. It's not I. It's the Lord, the entity, the Elohim is going to come. And then we have an entity that stops the destroyer entity. So this is a gatekeeper, not a killer. We've got two separate entities. Two lords, two roles. In Exodus 12:13, we've got a solo actor. The subject is I, the verb is see, pass over, strike, protect, all of it. Direct actions by one entity doing it all. No mention of any other agents. So the implication here is in 12:13, we have this Lord who claims to be both protector and destroyer simultaneously. That's extortion hostage logic, not override clarity. That's, I'm going to kill ya if you don't do what I say. That's the tone here. I'm going to wipe you out if you don't do what I say. But our doublet in 12:23, well, now God shows up as the gatekeeper. God will not allow the destroyer to enter your house, to strike you. That's protection. That's covenant protection. So the subject is a third person narrator. The verb is will not allow. The other entity is this destroyer. So someone else is doing the killing and the striking. So then the tone here is that the override covenant God is shielding the people, not executing anybody. This God or Lord is a protector, not a ritual enforcer. And we learned back in the dimensional worldview video in Ritual 1 that God's presence or the presence of a covenant bearing heir or entity, just their presence collapses false kingdoms and false constructs, illegal constructs. They collapse beneath their feet. So we have to go back and audit these plagues, find the ritual language, see that there's no other angels in these plagues. No other angel shows up in the other plagues. The only destroyer is a singular figure that comes through for the firstborn killing plague. So if God is protecting the people from this destroyer in the last plague, chances are, doesn't seem to be that God's doing the other plagues either. But it seems like God's presence, or the presence of a covenant bearer, has come into play, and the false kingdoms have ritually collapsed. The false kingdoms built on that ritual language are collapsing, and it looks like chaos. And then the final janky-ass God is going to come through and kill all the firstborn. And this is where God's presence steps in to shield the people. We're not doing a whole plague thing, but boy, oh boy, is it fun in the Greek. So do we see this angelic insertion doublets anywhere else other than Psalm 78, who claims the history of the Exodus is destroying legions of evil angels? That's who did it. Okay? So we've got, but it doesn't say that in the story. You see the difference here? They're giving us a tell. So the Psalm 78 plagues says in 78:49, he sent evil angels among them. Who? Which God did that, Judah? Jesus' father didn't send evil angels among them. That's your God. Your God sent the evil angels. My God showed up, and your shit collapsed. All that ritual false god shit in Egypt, those Egyptian janky-ass gods, their shit fell down. The only thing God did was protect his people from your janky-ass angel that came through to kill everybody. Because in Exodus 7 through 12, there's no angels named except the single destroyer in 12:23 that my covenant God protected the people from. So I don't know which angels you're talking about there, priesthood. Which angels, which ritual, evil, menacing legions are you talking about? The ones you sent to punish and ritually abuse Ephraim? Maybe those guys? Is that what you're talking about? So Psalm 78 retrofits all plagues with angelic wrath overlaying instead of override collapse of ritual kingdom. Our Exodus destroyer says, I will strike Egypt. There's no destroyer named. But in 23, he will not allow the destroyer to enter. Verse 13 corrupts the speaker and makes everything this Lord, whereas verse 23 reveals the true override gatekeeper versus ritual priesthood enforcing angels. That's not all. We also have the Sinai versus Horeb debate. And I've said before, don't worry about it. It's the same mountain. Well, we're going to worry about it today. Because in Deuteronomy 33, it claims that from myriads of quote unquote holy ones, holy simply means set apart. Okay. So just because you're holy doesn't necessarily mean that you're holy from Jesus's father, the Davidic covenant God. Holy means set apart. Okay. So from the myriads of set apart ones, the law came down. Exodus 19 says, no, God spoke all these words. So the Horeb covenant tradition inserts these angelic entourage, while Sinai covenant shows direct override speech with no intermediaries. See if we can take a look at that in Exodus 19. Share this tab instead. I'm sorry, I wanted to go to Deuteronomy 33. Share this tab instead. The Lord came from Sinai, and he came with 10,000 holy ones. God's mighty soldiers were by his side. All his holy people are in his hand. They sit at his feet and learn his teachings. Moses gave us the law. Excuse me? What? Excuse me? Interesting. Very interesting. But over here in Exodus, we don't see that. Okay? We don't see any of that. We see God. Period. That's it. So the implication here is that there's two different stories of what happened with the covenant, the Moses Sinai covenant, two different stories to how that happened to begin with. One according to the priesthood, one according to the Davidic bloodline covenant sons. The override God, if you will. Then we got off the Moses janky wife protocol. Okay. We're not going down this rabbit hole, but I want you to put a pin in this because we will. This is a circumcision string to pull. This is Moses's wife, Zipporah, and she has a little knife-wielding moment when Moses is in Midian, okay? He takes a break, he goes out to Midian, which is in Saudi Arabia, okay? By Tabuk, southern, western Saudi coast, okay? Right there on the Red Sea. What's happening here is there's an implied angelic threat to the family of Moses, okay? There's no angel named, and the override logic is unclear here. But what happens is because there's a direct threat on Moses and his family, the wife whips out her knife at the last second, not trusting the covenant God, okay, and instead engages in a priesthood ritual of circumcising the son and putting the blood onto Moses. Foreshadowing of a Passover, but a janky Passover. Moses' wife was the daughter of a high priest of the Midian priesthood down in Saudi, where, wait a minute, isn't that where Yahweh comes from? She was a high priestess. Her father wasn't the priesthood in the covenant God. Her father was a priesthood in southern Saudi. And at the last second, she did a blood ritual of circumcision and put the blood on Moses to protect him. So she's doing blood appeasement according to the priesthood of which God? I don't know. I'm guessing it's Yahweh. And this blood appeasement logic matches the destroyer protocol. But they've corrupted it. It made it into a heroic moment because it was near death and she saved him. But she didn't rely on the covenant God, I argue. I argue she was doing a blood ritual handed down from the priesthood of southwestern Saudi Arabian gods. Those people. So now we've got Moses with this cross-contamination, if you will, in an override Davidic God and a blood ritual from the priesthood. So we're battling for jurisdiction. Moses is being fought over in the spiritual realm. What jurisdiction? What is his covenant? Which God is he serving when? You see that? There's a battle for jurisdiction with Moses now because of the janky ass wife. So we're putting her in the janky wife protocol. This is where you're getting this thread to pull, guys. I told you it's a lot. And we should be going down all these rabbit holes in detail, but we're not even doing Exodus right now, okay? We're just throwing this out there. I want you to put a pin in all of this because we'll get back to all of it. The road trip from hell. This is where we're getting the idea in the New Testament that the law was given by angels. And where do we hear of this? Well, we hear of this when Stephen mentions it. And he's giving a speech in Acts, and he's accusing the Pharisees, and he's going through the history, and he goes, you got the law from these janky-ass angels, and you didn't even follow that. Like, you're way the fuck off base. He's not agreeing with their theology. He's accusing them of being in the wrong covenant and serving the wrong God, because their God sent angels with the law. That's what he's saying. This is again echoed by Paul, our favorite New Testament charlatan, in Galatians, when he says the law was put into effect through angels. You got to be careful when you're dealing with Paul, because he changes the words about adoption versus inheritance versus Gentiles versus Israel versus Jews versus Judeans versus law by angels, law by Moses, law by covenant. He's jankifying all these terms, you guys, and people don't understand it. Paul talks out of all sides of his mouth, but the side of his mouth he was talking about in Galatians was that the law was put into effect through angels, not God's angels, destroying angels, evil angels, malicious ones. But in Exodus 20, that doesn't exist in the Sinai story. God spoke these words. So Stephen's accusing this sect. Paul echoes this Babylonian priesthood theology in his letters and his lectures about the law. And they're both talking about this breach, this doublet between Sinai story and priesthood Babylon Horeb story. So we can stop arguing about whether Paul's Roman, Paul's Herodian, Paul's a Pharisee. Fuck it all. Paul's Babylonian priesthood. Enough. Which is both. Because both the Romans and the Greeks and the Herodians and your janky-ass priesthood post-Babylon, all those fuckers are built on the gods of ancient Egypt. Right? Mystery Babylon. So we've got Paul also does another destroyer insert, conveniently enough, in 1 Corinthians 10:10. And I'm going to take time out and we're going to look at Corinthians 10:10. Destroyed by the destroyer. Now what he's doing is he's referring back to a retelling in Numbers. But in Numbers 16, there's no angel name, okay, when the plagues are being described. So Paul is corrupting this story, this narrative about the rebellion scene using this destroying angel ritual enforcing logic, okay? But there's no angels happening in the original Hebraic culture. When I say Hebrew source, I mean oral source of the oral traditions and the covenant-bearing sons. The angels aren't there. The angels, the destroying angels and the janky-ass angels are only there in the priesthood accounts. And we're going to look at how evil 1 Corinthians 10 is. I always tell you, when it comes to Paul, it's really hard, Paul, to decide which one of your letters is the biggest letter from hell. I think Galatians is the biggest letter from hell, but Corinthians isn't too far behind. Colossians is a mess. They're all from hell. But not only are they from hell, but your more modern translators are making them even more from hell. And that's why I chose to show you the NIV for this verse and how bad this is. Now that you understand the janky angel breach that Psalm 78 has uncovered in the doublet stories with Sinai, Horeb, and this janky angel thing, and angels giving the law, well, warnings from Israel's history. Paul's going to lay out the history. Well, let's see if he gives the history of the covenant-bearing God, or if he gives the history of whichever God is sending legions of destructive angels who are evil and malicious and carrying out ritual-coded wrath. Let's see which ones he's talking about. For I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud and they all passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food. Oh, there's Paul with the covenant, with the table food covenant again. They drank the same spiritual drink. They drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them. And that rock that accompanied them through the sea with Moses was Christ. But even though Christ was there with them, now clearly he's not talking about Jesus, the man of Nazareth, the son of David. He's talking about the Logos entity, which he got adopted from Philo of Alexandria, our Egyptians, who was developing this Logos theory and mixing it with Greek Hellenized Jewish thought, ancient Egyptian ritual language, and standing on the shoulders of great philosophers like Aristotle, and developing this Logos idea through time. But Philo was a contemporary of Paul. They were in the same time. So while Philo's developing this idea of this ritualized Logos character, Paul borrows that theology, slaps Jesus's name onto it, and calls it the Christ, which comes straight out of Egypt. You see that now? And what entity comes straight out of Egypt? Well, of course, that's our Amun-Ra. With the eye thing, all your Hollywood celebrities covering one eye, the eye thing. Go back to the Baal series. Amun is the hidden god. Ra is the seeable sun god. But nevertheless, even though our Amun-Ra Christ was with them in Egypt, God was not pleased, and their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now, these things occurred, so he's talking about the road trip from hell in Exodus, as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. Don't be idolaters, as some of them were. The people sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry, and we should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. And in one day, 23,000 of them died. We should not test Christ. Let's be a good Bible reader. Some versions say, test the Lord. Well, what Lord do you think this is talking about? The New International Version decided that this Lord is Christ, the Logos entity, the Ray of Amun-Ra from Egypt. And how do we know this isn't Jesus, son of Galilee? Well, because look, we should not test Christ, Logos, as some of them did, and were killed by snakes. So the Christ Logos entity killed them with snakes out there in the desert. That was the Christ that Christians worship. Wrathful vengeance. Do not grumble, because as some of them did, and were just killed by the destroying angel. So now Christ is working right along with that destroying angel, or it's the same person. You guys see this now? You can't understand Paul until you understand the Old Testament. The split with the angels and the angel law, ancient Egyptian occult, and ritual language. If you don't have that under your belt, you can't understand Paul. And the church knows it. So do the scholars. So do the rabbis, I would argue. I'm sure they see this. They're happy about it, though. They're not warning anybody. We also have angel of the Lord ambiguity in Judges and Genesis. We've got our Revelation plagues. In Revelation 8 and 9, Christian theology states that the angels, the 7 angels, blow their trumpets and release the plagues, right? Lamb's opening the seals, angels blow the trumpets. And because those angels are standing before God, church is teaching they're God's angels. But I have a big problem with that. Every good thing comes from God. Every good thing comes from the Father of lights. The angel standing in front of God in Revelation takes the prayers of the saints, mixes them with fire, throws them to earth. Doesn't let those prayers get to God. This angel standing before God's throne is disgusted by the prayers. Why else would he mix them with fire? The prayers of God's people is being mixed with fire and thrown back to earth from where they came. This angel is cutting off the prayers from hearing God's words. You're going to tell me is God's angels doing that? We're going to audit Revelation. Put a pin in that. We've got our Exodus plagues, which is a direct collapse. Not angelic orchestration, guys. This is about override, that dimensional jurisdictional override throughout the whole thing. It's either God and God's agents doing covenant override and false systems collapse, or janky-ass angels. Just because it says angel doesn't mean they're on the good team. Revelation ritualizes wrath via angelic agents, which exactly mirrors Psalm 78's framework. We don't see any of that in Exodus, guys. It doesn't match. So we've got this angelic law-giving priesthood theology insert, and this whole belief comes from Deuteronomy 33, which says, the Lord came from Sinai with myriads of holy ones. There he is coming with his great soldiers by his side. Okay, thank you. Lovely. God and his evil angels are just oh so busy through the Bible, aren't they? So some people interpret this as the angels were delivering the law. That's your priests. And this is reinforced in Galatians, where Paul says the law was put into effect through angels by a mediator, which I'm assuming is his Christ Logos character. Guys, this is so dangerous. But I digress. This reflects a sectarian priesthood theology that saw angels as ritual enforcers, not messengers. God doesn't do ritual. God doesn't do enforcers. God is. Davidic covenant carriers, they are. There is no ritual. Not like this. And this is Stephen's speech, and you can find it in Acts 7. You, Pharisees, who received the law as ordained by angels and didn't keep it. You, that's you. That's your theology. That's not me. He didn't say we who received the law as ordained. You got your janky-ass law by the janky-ass angels, Pharisees. That's why they stoned him and put their coats at Saul of Tarsus's feet. Stephen isn't affirming this system. He's calling it out, like he's calling them out for everything else, from killing prophets to being assholes through the whole history. He's exposing this theology of the priesthood, glamoring these angels as giving the priesthood their authority. So this Exodus doublet shows us God alone versus angelic insert. And please put a pin in all of those angelic inserts that I sort of went over in our chart. For everywhere else that this shows up, you can see all the rabbit holes that branch out just from the angel doublet that we found by reading carefully in Psalm 78. So our covenant is Exodus 19, Sinai covenant. The Lord descended on Mount Sinai in fire, and God spoke all of these words. No angels mentioned. It's direct divine speech. God alone is speaking to Moses and the people. That's override clarity. But in Deuteronomy, when they recount this about quote unquote Horeb, we add in the angelic entourage. The fiery law from the holy ones is there. And the law is delivered through intermediaries. This is where it's coming to, all the way from Paul in the New Testament, all the way back, right here to the Exodus doublet and the janky-ass angel insertion. Sometimes blamed on Christ, quote unquote, who's then blamed on Jesus. But it's not, it's Amun-Re. Again, ancient Egyptian ritual infrastructure. So the angelic insertion doublets that are mapped all the way across Exodus, Deuteronomy, Acts, and Paul's letters, and there's more, just some ones we peeked at today. If you follow all of these pins, and we'll pull these pins eventually, we're not just going to hit and run, but we don't have time to go down all these rabbit holes now. Just put a pin in that. We'll come back to it later. Maybe 3 months from now, maybe 6 months from now, maybe a year from now. But we got other fish to fry, right? We're in Luke. We're in Paul's paganisms. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff, other stuff we got on the burner here. But we'll loop back to this, and we'll pull all those pins. So if you're not going to study that on your own, put a pin in that, and we'll get there. But if you follow the janky angel doublet, it reveals a consistent pattern. We're breaching override clarity from that covenant sons is being ritualized through these evil intermediaries, often called angels, who are later misattributed as these divine agents of law, wrath, and judgment. These insertions fracture the original covenant narrative and create theological confusion that ripples still today through both modern Jewish sectarian traditions and all of Christian doctrine. Christians have no idea what's coming and going with the law because they've never followed the angelic protocol, the janky-ass angel insertion protocol from the rabbis. Looking at you guys. So the implications of this angel breach, well, now what happens when you look at Jude, where the angel, Archangel Michael, God's angel, is arguing with Hasatan over what to do with the body of Moses puts it in a whole new perspective, especially if you follow the circumcision priesthood ritual that the janky-ass pagan wife did down in Saudi Arabia, where Yahweh comes from. That ritual priesthood gave the blood override on Moses. That was a priesthood ritual. Okay? So now we've got this battle that Jude is talking about. And it's jurisdictional. Why do you think Moses didn't dare accuse Hasatan in Jude? He just said, may the Lord rebuke you. Why wouldn't Michael accuse Satan? Didn't have the nerve to. Why? Because it's jurisdictional. He has dimensional jurisdiction, or at least has it under dispute because of an open door through ritual, priesthood, covenant, ritual, blood ritual. He's claiming that jurisdiction. And Michael's battling against it. They're fighting over Moses in the dimension because it's cross-contaminated with covenant God jurisdiction and janky-ass pagan wife priesthood ritual, blood ritual, opening that door for contested soul, space, jurisdiction, and who the hell's talking and when. Now it makes more sense as to why Moses wasn't allowed in the promised land. There's a whole lot of things here. I told you, you've got three main breach points. Lies about Jesus, lies about David, and lies about Moses. But when you see Moses this way, it makes more sense. It makes sense why James and Jesus are speaking of the law of Moses in one way, and Paul is speaking about the law of Moses in another way. Like, what is the law of Moses? Is it Sinai? Or is it the Horeb angel shit, the priesthood shit? This is why the confusion is there. Okay? The question is, the battle between Michael and Hasatan is he being claimed by ritual law, covenant, or override? What's happening here during this battle? This also gives you confusion among Christian sects. What's the law? The glamoured insertion of angels as lawgivers leads to widespread confusion about the nature of the law, quote unquote, itself, or the commands of God. Is it the divine override spoken directly by God in Exodus 20? Or are Christians and Paul talking about a ritual system delivered by angels and enforced through compliance? Which law does Paul say Jesus threw out? And I thought Jesus was the one that killed him with the snakes in the desert, if that's the Christ, according to the New International Version. Other versions it says the Lord. But they took it upon themselves to make Jesus Christ the one, the Christ, killed them with snakes. You see how janky this is, guys? Your translators are fucking evil. Ignorant, evil. So is the priesthood. So are the rabbis. And so are the scholars. They're all lying. But when you read and pull this angel string, it all begins to click into place. So our Horeb versus Sinai is our dimensional split that fuels this priesthood supremacy. It's not just a naming glitch. It's a covenant jurisdictional breach that they still have in place today. And how do we know it's still in place today? Well, because Ephraim's erased. Guys, the Gentiles were Israel first. They still are Israel to this day. The Jews were never Israel until Psalm 78. Post-Babylon. The word Jew never meant priesthood until after Babylon. It was just bloodline Judah, people of Judea. They took all of that locational and bloodline and attached it to the priesthood post-Babylon and called themselves Jews. That's what they did. Before Babylon, Jews were just people who lived in Judea, like Kentuckians or Californians. It wasn't until after Babylon that term Jew came into play, with people who are faithful to the temple priesthood. And the Jews, before that, never got a covenant. Ever. Ever. Ephraim is your northern kingdom. Ephraim is Israel proper, not Judah. Jews have nothing to do with Israel, nor the covenants, and they never have. Sinai covenant, but the Abrahamic covenant was a funnel. It started with Abraham. It went to Isaac. Then it got smaller with Jacob. Our bloodline's getting more defined with each passing son, more specific. Then from Jacob, it goes to Ephraim. It never passes to Judah. It stays with Ephraim. Ephraim north are dipshits. They go out to the world, bless all nations, and spread their seeds as Gentiles. It was always Gentiles. And then that little tiny remnant of Ephrathites, Rachel's sons, Genesis 48, the land in Judah, not of Judah, those are your Ephrathites. They get the Davidic covenant too. So this remnant bloodline from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Ephraim, David, Jesus, carry all covenants straight down through that bloodline. That's what happened. But Judah retained the priesthood control, aka lion, Babylon. Well, Ephraim was scattered and absorbed into the nations. And they're still using this lie today because they're still talking about these damn Noahide laws for the quote-unquote Gentiles. Jews. Sorry, not sorry. Covenants, Ephraim. That's not you. You never got a covenant. Your Noahide laws are for the Gentiles. Sinai is for the Gentiles. Abraham was a Gentile. Isaac was a Gentile. Jacob was a Gentile. They were Hebrew Gentiles. Hebrew doesn't mean Jew. Hebrew means Gentiles chosen to carry covenants for God. Jacob to Ephraim. Oh, looky, another Gentile. All covenants. Oh, David. Looky, an Ephrathite. Another Gentile. Davidic covenant. He wasn't a priesthood ritual elite post-Babylon, calling himself a Jew. He called himself an Ephrathite. Ephrathite in Judah. Bethlehem in Judah. Bethlehem Ephrathah in Judah. He was of the region of Judah, not of the bloodline priesthood Judah. Sorry. Wah, Gentile. But this crap-ass bullshit Noahide framework that the priesthood came up with claims that Gentiles are, well, you guys just get 7 universal laws that we made up. While the Jews follow a full Torah given to them by the janky-ass angels. And this split is based on a belief of priesthood supremacy, ritual registry erasure of Ephraim, and reinterpretation of what covenant access is, means, and which bloodline held it to begin with. And it all comes from Psalm 78. So the Horeb Sinai split is not just literary. It is the multi-dimensional jurisdictional root of priesthood supremacy via janky-ass angelic law-giving. It's the ritual erasure of Ephraim and the ritual punishment of Ephraim. If Exodus story, plagues, never talked about legions of destroying angels sent by God, it talked about one that wasn't sent by God, that God protected them from. One destroying angel in all of Exodus. And that one destroying angel was the enemy of God. There's no legions. So if they're telling a different story using coded Egyptian ritual language, then they're not telling a history, which is exactly what I told you at the beginning when we started this psalm. It is not a lament or a song. It is a lesson with hidden riddles. Okay? They're ritualizing the language and throwing it on Ephraim to erase them and punish them ritually with interdimensional jurisdictional warfare. That's what's happening. They're forcing Ephraim to be punished by the destroying angels they just sicked on him. That's what's happening. This gives them this crap-ass justification for their shitty Noahide laws that they made up. And it provides them ritual gatekeeping that completely fractures override access to the Father and to the correct covenant. The Gentiles were not outsiders. They were the Hebrews. They were the registry Israelites scattered through Ephraim. And the override God never needed intermediaries to speak, protect, or covenant. The presence of covenant bearers collapses false kingdoms. There's no need to send janky-ass angels around to torture people for wrath and evil and maliciousness. That's not Jesus' Father. Be careful of this. This is the interpretive system which allows for layered readings, but it enables corrupt theology to hide ritual, Judah-centric supremacy behind mystical interpretation. So be very, very careful when you're talking and trusting the rabbis. Because these angelic doublets don't just distort history, the oral tradition of the Hebrews. They completely fracture the scroll. What began as God dealing with a small bloodline of people, that remnant bloodline, for override clarity to bless the nations, with God walking and speaking and protecting his people, was corrupted into a system of ritual, evil, angel intermediaries, blood ritual appeasement, and quote-unquote angelic enforcement. The dispute over Moses' body, the confusion about the law, these aren't theological quirks. They're evidence of a multidimensional ritual breach pattern and punishment on pretty much the rest of the earth through Ephraim. Psalm 78 uses Exodus language to blame Ephraim, but they're not recounting the Exodus story. They can't be, because there's no bands of evil angels. There's no legion of angels. There's no other angel. There's one. They didn't keep God's covenant and refused to live by his law. Whose law? Your law? your angel's law. Then comes the wrath, the destroying legions of angels, and the tribal inversion crowning Judah as they ritually curse Ephraim in the multidimensional and astral planes with black magic occult ritual language that comes straight out of Egypt. They weren't telling the story of the Exodus. There were no angels in Exodus. But they put them in there. Why? Why? Because they ritually scapegoated a whole people using Exodus language and motifs to ritually punish and erase the northern bloodline. This isn't the father of the son of David. The father of the son of David doesn't ritually curse people with destroying angels in the astral realm. This is an evil priesthood post-Babylon with evil entities operating through tribal inversion, spiritual misattribution, and ritual cult. That's what this is. This is not the father of the son of David. This is another entity operating through the corrupt priesthood to ritually curse, not tell a history. There ain't no janky ass legions of angels in this history, these oral stories. They're using the ritual language from the Exodus to ritually curse a people group. Implement tribal inversion and spiritual misattribution. That's what Psalm 78 does. The difference is not just jurisdictional framing. The Horeb tradition reflects ritual theology, while the Sinai version is the override God. The father of the son of David doesn't need janky-ass, evil, malicious angels, legions of them, to deliver his law. So, we learn that these destroying angels aren't mentioned in Exodus, and they're certainly not sent by Jesus' father. So what God are you talking about there, Judah? What God is this that sends these evil, malicious, destroying angels that you ritually cursed on people? Who's that? Maybe Amun-Re from your little Egyptian stuff? Maybe that. Same one that Paul preaches? Think you have anything in common? Because Psalm 78's destroying legions are not present in Exodus. And your retelling falsely attributes the wrath of your janky-ass angels to Jesus' father. These same entities show up with Paul and Stephen's accusation, confirming, oh, they're definitely part of your priesthood's ritual judgment system. It has nothing to do with override mercy. It has to do with ritual punishment and a cult. That's what it has to do with. And this whole thing sets the stage for a dimensional, jurisdictional identity audit. Who's really behind this scroll? And every other one. Who's telling which story? There's our question. We found our breach. We know exactly where it started, right from the beginning. Kind of like Jesus said, sowed that janky-ass seed right along with the good seed from the beginning. And it needs to be audited, all these doublets. Because it's not just, oh, well, different people came together to write the Bible. Is it now? It's certain people came in, corrupted it, and ritually cursed others through it. That's a whole nother ballgame. So, next time, we're going to take a real good look at Genesis 48 and recast these characters, because cubs don't rule, lions do. So who's the lion? Who's your lion, Judah? Who's the lion that's got you trapped with their scepter? Kings don't hold scepters between their feet. They would trip over it. And cubs do not arise from the prey to rule. Cubs are trained. So who's your lion, Judah? We're going to find out. So we got through our angel audit. Read it, did all these. And once we recast Genesis 49 next time, it's going to lead us to a genealogy audit. Caleb and Joshua, which is another big mess. I'm going to do a little speculation there. Recast Revelation 5:5. The next time. So like I said in the first video, this isn't just academic sleight of hand. It's spiritual malpractice. And over here at my house, oh, I'm looking at all of you. All of you Christians, the entire priesthood, all the Jews and the rabbis, and you scholars, shame on you.
Well, shut that shit down. No exceptions.
Energy. Energy. You cannot fuck with this. Energy. You cannot fuck with this energy. Love to all those in the flesh. All of those who are listening. Don't miss the message, judging me. You cannot fuck with this energy. Energy.